It's an autumn night in 1972, and this dad is about to tell his son a secret that he's kept hidden for years.
Do you know what the word homosexual means?
That's the premise of the groundbreaking made-for-TV movie That Certain Summer. Starring a young Martin Sheen and developed by the guys who created Columbo just a few years earlier, That Certain Summer was a groundbreaking project that many thought could never be made.
It was the first time on network television that an openly gay relationship was accepted.
In fact, before it was even filmed, the movie caused an uproar behind the scenes and in public. On one side were those who felt that it should be banned from the airwaves.
They said, we wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, get out of here.
And on the other, a handful of brave writers, actors, and producers who fought to smash a television taboo.
He fought his own network to get that picture on.
And when the dust settled, this broadcast helped bring about a TV revolution and had an impact that even its creators couldn't have anticipated.
And he said this picture saved his life.
This is the story of That Certain Summer, one of the most important TV movies ever made. It was the early 1970s, and one of the top writing teams in television were two guys named Richard Levinson and William Link. They were childhood friends who had been writing together ever since they were boys in Philadelphia, creating their own Superman comics in the 1940s. As professional writers, they moved to Hollywood and honed their skills on shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Fugitive, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and by the late 60s, they'd had a couple of big hits, having created the show Mannix and then Columbo. Now, they were looking for their next big dramatic story to tackle. In a book about their careers, Levinson and Link describe how they spent one morning in late 1971 struggling to come up with ideas. And then they decided to grab some food. On their way out, they stopped by the office of a friend, the director Don Driver, who was working on a movie called The Naked Ape. And when they stopped by his office,
and there was this young boy sitting in the office, and I said to the secretary, well, who's the child? And she says, oh, that's Don's son. Wham.
Levinson and Link knew that Don was gay. They were even friends with his lover, John. But they didn't know that he had a son from a previous marriage to a woman, and that the son came to visit him over the summer. They never really thought about gay people raising kids. And afterwards, William Link said he couldn't stop wondering what that was like.
I said, boy, there's a drama. You see it right there. There's the whole kernel of it.
This, he thought, could be the story they were looking for. A sensitive look at the life of two gay men raising a son. But Levinson wasn't sure that was such a good idea.
And we said, yeah, but you can never do it for television.
For context, this was just 2 years after Stonewall, and homosexuality was still widely considered too obscene to discuss on TV.
I mean, because you just had, cops going in and raiding gay bars in Greenwich Village. I mean, gays were still being, persecuted. It was terrible.
Earlier that year, All in the Family had made history on CBS as one of the first shows to feature a positive depiction of a gay man.
I mean, you bachelors, you got them coming and going like running water, huh?
Whatever you say, Art.
Though many viewers were scandalized by that episode, including President Richard Nixon.
Sock it to me?
So why was TV so hostile to the gays? Well, back then, homosexuality was still officially classified as a mental illness. It was illegal in almost every state, and there was a code of conduct for TV broadcasters that limited depictions of homosexuality, or what at the time the code referred to as sex abnormalities. But Levinson and Link didn't want to show queer people as criminals or freaks or the object of derision. They wanted to write a story about two gay men as they'd never appeared on TV before.
The two heroes of this picture are gay males.
They knew their chances were slim, and they started pitching the idea around town.
And we went to NBC with the idea, and they said, we wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Get out of here.
But then they had lunch with an executive at ABC. At the time, ABC was a struggling last-place network. Executives were particularly miffed about having turned down All in the Family a year earlier, and they were looking for something cutting-edge that would set them apart.
We said, well, we've got this idea. We told him the idea, and he said, Barry might be interested in that idea.
Barry was Barry Diller. A college dropout whose entertainment career started in a mailroom, Barry had worked his way up at ABC through his 20s, and then in 1968 had a hand in developing a new concept, the ABC Movie of the Week. It was a huge success and helped launch the career of directors like Steven Spielberg and producers like Aaron Spelling. And by the time Barry was 29 years old, he'd worked his way up to the head of entertainment at ABC. William Link had a feeling there was a reason Barry might be particularly open to this project.
Now, Barry's not out of the closet, but the word in Hollywood was that Barry was gay.
Barry Diller was, and still is, very guarded about his personal life. It's something he never discusses, though lots of other people have. And at that meeting in 1971, Levinson and Link had his full attention. They only got a few sentences into their pitch when Barry told them, "I like it. You have a deal." That was great, but what they didn't have was a script, or a cast, or a lot of confidence that anyone else at ABC would let them make this picture. Still, Diller assured them he had their back.
I'll get it through this network by hook or by crook, I'll get it through this network. He fought his own network to get that picture on.
He committed it to the schedule in fall of 1972, but finding actors to play the gay couple was tricky.
You couldn't get actors to play that role. I remember Cliff Robertson said, "I'd rather play Hitler than play that man." Please.
Agents told them they'd never let their clients take these roles, that playing gay was simply too dangerous. And as Levinson and Link struggled to find the right actors, two in particular caught their attention: Martin Sheen and Hal Holbrook. But they were nervous about taking the roles too.
I twisted their arms out of their sockets. They were both terrified of playing a gay relationship.
These days, you probably know Martin Sheen for The West Wing, or as the voice of the elusive man in Mass Effect, or from Grace and Frankie. But back then, he was a small-time actor with only a handful of TV credits. But as it happened, he'd already played a gay character once before, a gay cab driver on the cop show Dan August, in an episode where he gets murdered by his boyfriend. Hal Holbrook, on the other hand, was a big star at the time. He'd appeared on a ton of TV shows. He won a Tony for playing Mark Twain on stage. He was actually considered the country's most preeminent Mark Twain impersonator for most of his life. When Levinson and Link first approached him, he turned them down.
In those days, back then, homosexuality was not talked about. I mean, you didn't listen today as no, you did not talk about it.
But after he said no, he started describing the script to his wife, the actress Carol Rawson.
I started telling the story. Then I stopped. And she said, "Hal." I said, "Yeah, I'm just thinking this is not so bad, is it?"
Carol told him to call his agent.
And pray to God he hasn't turned the job over to somebody else.
Martin and Hal slowly started to get more invested.
There's a principle here, and the principle is what attracted me. So they're homosexuals, so what? 85% of my friends are gay. They just are.
In a memoir, Martin's son Emilio Estevez describes how his dad saw a lot of potential in the project. He liked the script because instead of preaching, it focused on the relationship between two individuals who cared deeply about each other. They also got a nudge from the director who Levinson and Link had hired to make the film, a former actor named Lamont Johnson.
And I kept telling them what a challenge it was to do this. That, they were both eminently straight guys, and that why should they draw the line at playing a really wonderful relationship, a wonderful set of characters?
And Hal's son made one more good argument.
And the son said, "Dad, you'd be a great homosexual."
And so, over the objections of their agents, they agreed to take the parts. But the difficulties were only just starting.
And I got this wonderful memo from a top executive at NBC, which said, "Lamont, there must be no physical contact between the two men in this story, not even lingering eye contact."
In early May of 1972, they got a list of changes that the censors wanted. Some were pretty mild, like change the word butt to tail. But a lot of the notes focused on either removing gay content or making their depiction less positive. For example, in a scene where a gay couple was supposed to appear in the background, censors demanded that the two men not hold hands or show any affection at all. Instead, the audience should be able to tell that they're gay from their dress, their walk, mannerisms. At another point, the Doug character describes being gay as just another way of loving, which censors insisted be changed to another way of living. And a scene where one of the men says, "We love each other," was definitely out because, censors wrote, saying "we love each other" was too explicit. And then, Levinson and Link were ordered to report to ABC to explain themselves. The meeting was with Barry Diller, who was fighting to keep the project intact, and three guys from the Standards and Practices Department who were fighting to make huge changes. One of them was Alfred Schneider, the head of Standards and Practices at ABC. The other two were a lawyer named Samuel Polsky and a psychiatrist named Melvin Heller. A few years earlier, Polsky and Heller had been hired by the National Association of Broadcasters, a trade group of TV networks, to research the effects of violence on television. Since then, ABC had come to rely heavily on their advice. When there were concerns about the content of a show, executives often asked them to weigh in on the legal and social implications. Heller and Polsky had gone through the script for That Certain Summer, and they didn't like what they found. They felt that it violated a rule that all the networks had to follow at the time called the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine said that anytime a show presented a controversial issue, it had to be presented in a way that reflected different viewpoints. Heller and Polsky's opinion was That Certain Summer violated that rule, presenting a hitherto unspeakable subject in a way that went against the prevailing climate of public opinion because it was too pro-homosexual. They felt the script needed to balance the matter-of-fact depiction of a gay couple by adding a new character whose sole purpose was to put them down. Preferably, they said, an authority, like a police officer, or as they put it, an Archie Bunker character to condemn the couple. That was the opposite of what Levinson and Link wanted their movie to be, and they pushed back. They argued that the simple fact of gay people existing isn't controversial, and that plenty of gays are healthy, well-adjusted people. When they said that, Heller, the psychiatrist, exploded at them. "Don't give me your showbiz cocktail party analysis. I've treated these guys, and I know them. They hate women, they can't get it up, they're hostile as hell." He went on and on, telling them how sick homosexuals were, right in front of Barry Diller.
Maligning gay people to Diller. Diller was sweating. I mean, it was awful. Either they didn't know or it was a vicious kind of thing.
Heller finished by accusing Levinson and Link of inserting oral sex symbolism into the script, which was baffling news to them. Heller claimed that the oral sex reference was a scene where a father and son are seen blowing on dandelions. Now, it's important to note that sexuality was by no means Heller's area of expertise. His education was in child psychiatry, and for the previous decade, he'd been working in prison psychiatry, where a major focus of his job was evaluating inmates for parole, primarily violent offenders. The fact that this was one of the experts that the entire television industry relied on for analysis of controversial scripts goes some way towards explaining why depictions of homosexuals at the time were so distorted. This group of men had the power to cancel the entire project. So Levinson, Link, and Diller knew they had to play along. Eventually, they managed to bargain the notes down to 2 changes that allowed the film to proceed. One change was adding the anti-gay character that Heller had wanted. But instead of making him an authority figure, they made him a relative who waffles between being tolerant and insulting towards the couple.
So we put that in and we figured that really didn't hurt us. Because, hey, America's full of these kind of people. This is what gay people put up with.
The second change was a few lines of dialogue added to a scene where the dad, Doug, comes out to his son. Originally, the scene had Doug simply explaining that he was gay and in love with Gary. But Schneider added lines in which Doug goes into great detail about the terrible things that people say about gays, and even seems to agree with some of them. Levinson and Link hated that change, and later said they wished they'd refused to accept it. But at the time, it seemed like the only way to get the movie made. They shot the movie over the summer around LA and the Bay Area, and the director, Lamont Johnson, took care to present Gary and Doug as more nuanced, human characters.
So I said, I do not want camp. I don't want gay stereotypes. I just want the relationship between the two of you to be unmistakably a strong, mutually dependent, loving relationship.
And for the most part, the team was able to shoot everything that they wanted, although they did have to use some of Schneider's new dialogue. And they couldn't have the couple show any physical affection at all.
You couldn't really have a kiss or a touch at that time. No way. The fact that maybe the scene would be on the air was anathema enough.
And Lamont was able to at least get a little revenge on the censors by shooting something extra.
It's a long story of how I got even with them. I did something really obscene and that could be cut out, and it had them in panic.
Whatever he shot that was so obscene remains a mystery, unfortunately. If you have any information on what it might have been, please let me know, because there's no trace of it in the final product. What made the final cut was totally chaste. By the time shooting wrapped in late summer, Levinson and Link were more or less satisfied with what they'd got. Now, it was time to get it on the air and see what America would think. In the lead up to the broadcast, Barry Diller was nervous about how it would be received, so he came up with a plan. Instead of the usual ad campaign for a movie of the week, he arranged special screenings ahead of time for critics, community groups, and professional organizations.
We had a lot of screenings at the studio every night. We invited psychiatrists, sociologists, etc.
ABC also reached out to reporters and arranged for extensive news coverage. In the weeks leading up to the broadcast, there were tons of articles about how ABC was making TV film history, that it would be the most talked about movie of the new season, and marked a new era for TV. Barry's goal was that if viewers complained about being caught off guard by the subject matter, ABC could just say that they did everything they could to let viewers know what they were getting into. Behind the scenes, they called it defanging the opposition. And then the night finally came, November 1st, 1972. There was some resistance to the broadcast. Stations in Indiana and Florida refused to air it. A station in Alabama moved it to an 11:30 p.m. slot. As a substitute, that channel aired Viva Las Vegas, a film with plenty of heterosexual titillation.
When this boy falls, he really falls hard. But who wouldn't? When the girl is seductive Anne Margaret.
And in Miami, the local ABC affiliate got a bomb threat. But despite all that, That Certain Summer aired in almost every market in the country. And here's what viewers saw. It starts with the introduction of Doug, the no-nonsense contractor played by Hal Holbrook.
You know something? I think I'm in love with you. My ex couldn't even hang a picture.
It's an overrated talent.
And Gary, Doug's affable boyfriend of almost a year, played by Martin Sheen.
Hi, how are you?
The couple's getting ready for a visit from Doug's son, Nick, who has no idea that his father is gay. He's played by 15-year-old actor Scott Jacoby, who you might recognize from a role he'd play a decade later.
Blanche, this is my son, Michael.
I would get up, but I've thrown my back totally out of whack. You see, what happened was...
Oh, you don't have to explain. My mother already told me all about you.
When Nick arrives, Doug introduces Gary as just a friend. But Nick can tell that there's something more going on. And here's one of the places where the filmmakers found an ingenious way to suggest that Doug and Gary are close without getting shut down by the censors. Remember, they'd been told they couldn't show any contact, even lingering eye contact. So in scenes where they talk to each other affectionately, the camera cuts away to show Nick eavesdropping on them. For example, this scene where they tease each other about quitting smoking.
At least I won't have to live with smoke hits in my eyes.
Oh, come on, I'm down to under a pack a day.
Oh, let's hear it for him. Down to under a pack. Score one for Will Puff.
Because the gay couple's off camera, there's no risk of showing something too graphic. It's up to viewers to infer what kind of contact they're engaging in. And take a look at how Levinson and Link handled the network interference over the fairness doctrine. As ordered, they added a character who seems ambivalent about homosexuality, a brother-in-law named Phil. He's played by Joe Don Baker, an actor who is mostly known for tough guy roles in westerns and cop movies.
Joe Don Baker is Martha Mitchell.
On one hand, Phil goes out of his way to let Gary know he's okay with them being gay.
I believe everybody's got a right to live their own life any way they want to. You understand? I mean, it takes all kinds to make up the world.
But he's also a little patronizing and winds up suggesting that there really is something wrong with dating a man.
You don't have to feel awkward about bringing him over here.
Why should I feel awkward?
And after Gary leaves, Phil tosses off an even more unfriendly remark.
I mean, some guys wouldn't even let him in the house.
You can also see a result of Levinson and Link's fight with network censors over gay characters holding hands. The censors absolutely wouldn't allow that. So the furthest the movie is able to go is showing an unnamed couple briefly helping each other climb off a bridge. It's an unfortunate change, because without the hand-holding, Doug's reaction makes no sense.
That bothered you, didn't it? I don't like public displays.
Public displays of what, Doug? It's just an example of how clumsy some of the censors' edits were. Anyway, eventually Nick finds a watch with an inscription from Gary to Doug with love, and he freaks out. Doug realizes he's gonna have to explain what's going on. So he goes for a walk with his kid, and here's where we get to the big coming out scene. And even more tinkering from Alfred Schneider and his pals.
Do you know what the word homosexual means?
The scene is a mix of good dialogue and bad. For example, Doug's explanation of why he's coming out to his son is pretty good.
I've lied to myself for a long time. Why should I lie to you?
Putting it in those terms makes it clear. Doug's doing this because he wants to be honest with somebody he cares about who he is. But then he also throws out dialogue like this.
Most people, I guess, think it's wrong. They say it's something that has to be cured. If I had a choice, it's not something I'd pick for myself.
Well, now it sounds like he hates being gay. But then he switches back to talking about his relationship in more positive terms.
Nick, we love each other.
Remember, that was one of the lines that the censors tried to cut because they said it was too explicit. So it was at least a small victory that they were able to keep it in. And meanwhile, throughout the scene, Nick looks absolutely miserable, like he's getting the news that his father's about to die. In the end, Nick walks away from his dad, and his mom comes to take him back home. She offers one slightly optimistic line.
Give him a little time.
And then they're gone. This would be a good time for Gary to console his partner, but since they're not allowed to touch, he instead says a few comforting words to the back of Doug's head, and then goes off to work. The film ends with a slow push on Doug's face, crying, and then dissolves to a memory of him and his son in happier days. It ends with a freeze frame on, of all things, the dandelion scene that had caused Melvin Heller so much agitation. Overall, a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, Gary and Doug come off as pretty good guys. They're friendly, responsible, compassionate. They have a great collection of 8-tracks.
The dirt down under. Clovis and the ape.
But the script also has Doug make some pretty negative remarks about being gay. And he gets a super depressing ending, rejected by his kid, left alone to cry. So, how'd it go over with viewers? Well, thanks in part to all the media coverage, it was one of the most watched shows of the week. 23 million people tuned in. A third of all televisions in the country watched the broadcast. And there were, of course, some viewers disgusted by what they saw. A handful of angry letters referred to the characters as sick animals who should be locked up. Some gay viewers were upset too, mostly over all the concessions that ABC had forced Levinson and Link to make. The Philadelphia newsletter The Gay Alternative complained about the lack of physical contact and about Doug's self-loathing speech at the end, calling the film terribly negative. In New York, the Gay Activists Alliance called the movie out for the son's harsh rejection of his dad. But they also praised it for avoiding the appalling TV stereotypes of gay men. ABC switchboards were ready for a flood of calls, and they got hundreds, but the calls were overwhelmingly positive. One reason for that positive response might be the mix of positive depiction with a bummer ending. Yes, the film shows a gay couple as fine, upstanding members of society, but it also ends with them unhappy and alone. So viewers who wanted better representation of gays got at least some of what they wanted, and viewers who thought homosexuality was a sickness could say that it affirmed their beliefs too. And on balance, most viewers reported that they liked what they saw. Market research showed that 75% of viewers reported enjoying the film, about equal to the percent that enjoyed The Wonderful World of Disney also that week. A reviewer for the New York Times called it simply marvelous, a landmark.
So we were a knockout. Me and Marty, it was a big hit.
That response suggested that viewers might be ready for more like this. In fact, the film was nominated for 7 Emmys, although it only took home 1 for Scott Jacoby playing the kid. According to William Link, the award snub was deliberate, the work of a single Academy judge on the panel that picked the winners.
We knew one man who was on the Blue Ribbon panel that night, who was an acquaintance of ours at Universal, a producer, who was a definite homophobe.
So the TV industry clearly still had a ways to go. Still, Levinson and Link got lots of letters from TV writers, producers, and directors saying that the success of That Certain Summer had inspired them to follow their lead. And sure enough, over the next few years, there were well-rounded queer characters all over primetime, from The Mary Tyler Moore Show to Barney Miller to MASH. Now that's not to say that That Certain Summer fixed queer representation on TV overnight. There were still some negative depictions on other shows, in particular on the ABC show Marcus Welby MD, which in 1974 had an episode so awful it caused gay groups to march on network headquarters and take over the building. We don't have time for that story now, but I'll be posting a bonus video over on Patreon with all the details. That's at patreon.com/mattbaum. And despite the warnings, That Certain Summer certainly didn't hurt the careers of anyone involved. In fact, Martin Sheen appeared in another gay-themed TV movie a few years later, and he's still playing gay roles to this day. And this time, nobody's telling him he's not allowed to show affection. And beyond affecting the television industry, That Certain Summer also had a big impact on viewers' lives. Levinson and Link had a friend who kept a copy of the film on hand and often screened it for friends.
He rented the movie and showed it to gay younger friends who had never seen the picture to show them what had happened in 1972, which was incredible.
And not long after it aired, they got a letter from a psychiatrist in Michigan who told them that one of his patients caught the broadcast. It was a young man who'd been rejected by everyone he knew for being gay and was close to taking his own life.
He said, "Oh my God, if this is on television, I can't be this monster that everybody in this town thinks I am." And he said this picture saved his life.
That's when our profession becomes something better than just being an actor. You feel you can do something for people who are not given a good shot, you know. That meant a lot. It meant a lot.
In making this video, I came across lots more great stories that I just didn't have room for here, like the multiple times that gay liberation groups got fed up waiting for better depictions and took over network headquarters, or the times that TV shows tried to capture what gay bars looked like in the 70s with mixed success, and what else All in the Family did to infuriate Richard Nixon.
Call him Mr. Nixon.
Or Tricky Dicky.
I'll have those stories in bonus videos over at patreon.com/mattbaum. And if you like stories about pop culture history, you probably will enjoy my upcoming book that tracks the history of queer characters on American sitcoms, from Bewitched to The Golden Girls to Friends and beyond. It's called Hi Honey, I'm Homo. It comes out on May 23rd, 2023, and pre-orders are now open at gaysitcoms.com. Big thanks to everybody who makes these videos possible with your support. And now, if you'll excuse me, Mark Twain has offered to make me his signature seafood feast.
The oyster alone probably required 15 million years to get it to come out just right.